Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. This is the show where I take every classic Doctor Who story plus a bunch of Big Finish audio dramas, one episode a day, 7 days a week. And today, on the 6th of July 2019, we are starting to look at the finale to the 16th season of Doctor Who and the end of the Key to Time arc, The Armageddon Factor, written by Bob Baker and Dave Martin. Starting, of course, with part 1. Now, the Armageddon Factor is a story that is set on the planet that at least we open up with the Doctor on the planet Atrios, which is at war with its twin planet Zeos, in a nuclear holocaust where we are introduced to the Marshall, the military leader in charge, played by John Woodvine, who is clearly our antagonist throughout a lot of this first episode. Bob Baker and Dave Martin, in what is their second 6-part story, they wrote the mutants way back in the Pertwee era as 6 episodes, and nothing like that since. They start by actually giving us a lot of time on the planet Atrios, basically so the audience can kind of acclimatize to the new planet. So the audience, part of the point is that the audience needs to get a sense of what this planet is like, the dire straits. The Marshal, he seems to be not only tired of war, but determined to win the war by any means necessary. We are introduced partially to Princess Astra, who has a sort of relationship with this Melek, who works in the hospital, caring for the wounded soldiers and children. Again, this is a nuclear war, so there's radiation on the planet. There is a lot of the episode dedicated to feeling out this planet, and to be honest, it is excellent. Bob Baker and Dave Martin do an excellent job of giving you this atmosphere of this planet being war-torn and just full of people who are sort of hardened, not only hardened by war, but just living through a war that they don't even know if they can win anymore. They have basically built themselves an empire based on war, not even seeing the enemy. Princess Astra is played by Lalla Ward, who I only bring up because she becomes important much later on. It wants peace. She and Melek have been trying to contact Zeos, the enemy, just to try to find peace. And once again, Bob Baker and Dave Martin do an excellent job, one of making their relationship, just sort of feel like, a real relationship, and feel, like a real sense that these characters are trying to make a difference in the world. They want to see their world come to some sort of peace, even if this dream is completely far-fetched and, just completely something that they can try to work to, but they have no real way of knowing if they're actually going to make it. As an episode, it's interesting because the Doctor and Romana, they're there. We don't actually follow them for much of this first episode, which, in the case of a 6-parter, isn't necessarily a bad thing. Baker and Martin are doing a good job of really sowing the seeds of the other characters, so we as an audience can get to know them. But the Doctor and Romana, of course, and K9 are looking for that final segment of the Key to Time. They track it to Atrios, and then something weird happens. They arrive at Atrios. They initially can't find Atrios, and then they can't find Zeos. They're trying to figure it out when the Marshal, having one of his underlings having detected the Doctor and the TARDIS, sends a nuclear missile. So the Doctor and Romana then use that to sort of make them feel like they were destroyed so they can sneak into the planet. Again, the Doctor also finds it odd that, oh, there's a war going on? This really shouldn't be happening. And especially not here. This doesn't make much sense. And actually, on the planet, all the Doctor and Romana in this first episode do is land, figure out that everything's in a state of war, get captured by the Marshal, try to run back to the TARDIS, and find the TARDIS missing, as well as we see Princess Astra disappear, because the Marshal doesn't believe in pacifism, and her pacifistic ideals are getting in the way of the Marshal's military power, in something that is basically, this is something where you basically get a real sense of who the Marshal is, but also you get a sense that that the characters really have this big sense of importance going on. You have Atrios and Zeos at each other's throats. They aren't, they're not the best, they're not the absolute best, they're not the best sort of characters. They are, they want the Doctor. They immediately think the Doctor and Romana are spies and is going to have them shot. But also, perhaps almost more interestingly, is that the Marshal himself seems to be talking to himself or potentially a different power. It's intentionally left at least a little vague, because you really don't know what possibly could be going on. There's a good sense that the story could be ending here. It's in a very, very weird thing, but we're starting out, we're starting out with what is a really, really good story episode. Again, there could have been a bit more built up around this first episode, and we could have had the Doctor and Romana get in sooner, but still, this is a great start for the story. So overall, I'm going to give the Armageddon Factor Part 1 an 8 out of 10. It is the 7th of July, 2019, and I just finished watching Part 2 of the Armageddon Factor. Part 2 of the Armageddon Factor is really good for what it does to the story, because we're bringing this story up to almost a new level here. A sort of new level of depth and intrigue while still telling the story. You had the mysterious figure credited as the Shadow take Princess Astra and the TARDIS away. So the Doctor and Romana are trapped on Atrios, and in being trapped on Atrios, you already have the Marshal who wants them dead because he's obviously insane. But then his personality switches. Immediately switches. K9 is taken to go to scrap, and a lot of this episode is trying to get K9 out of the possible furnace. And the Marshal then changes his mind and wants the Doctor for help with ending the war, finding a solution, but not a peaceful solution, a solution where Zeos is dead and Atrios wins. So the Doctor's, of course, first thought is, well, I'll put a barrier up, no one can get in, no one can get out. Partially they do, well, at least no one can attack, no one can no more lives will be lost due to this conflict, this raging war. And even then I can maybe buy myself some more time to figure out what exactly is going on here. Because, the Doctor here is written... Tom Baker is obviously doing his usual Tom Baker performance of not quite being over the top, but being, loud and the Doctor, and very much and very much doing the story as, the over-the-top character we know. But he also, there's a method to his sort of over-the-topness here. He obviously wants to see peace happen, because even though he doesn't really know what the conflict is over, because no one really knows what the conflict is over. The sort of misdirection here that this is just a conflict that nobody knows, why is there actually a conflict here when there really shouldn't be? It's is a big part of what the episode is about. That Bob Baker and Dave Martin are writing a story about sort of what happens in war. And the Marshal played by John Woodvine is great. We also get some nice little tidbits that something might be controlling him. Romana sees a cylinder on his neck that seems to be controlling his moods. His second in command has no idea what he wants. He just follows orders. And there's quite a bit here with, you have the character of Melek, who was Astra's companion, sort of secret lover. That character, he very much still wants to try to find, he obviously wants to find the princess who disappeared. He's also interrogated as a traitor, working with Zeos, and basically building up to a big reveal a little after midway through the episode, where it's revealed that Princess Astra was captured by Zeos and basically is demanding peace or they're going to kill her. It's sort of this big final ultimatum here, which is really good. Lala Ward gets to show off her acting chops, and why she's such a good guest actress, because you have this big dark reveal of, oh my god, she's not only been captured, but she's been captured, and everything is not only falling apart, but everything is perhaps ready to everyone's ready to die, basically, for what they believe in, and for just the idea that they are on a planet where you really could see the end of the world. The world, the Atrios itself could be ending here. You obviously have radiation increasing, but honestly, there are quite a few good sequences here. K9 being sent to the furnace is really good and really harrowing. The idea that K9 is going to be used as a computer just to try to help the Doctor and Romana figure out what's going on Atrios, and really what they can do to help, if they can really do anything. Because the fact that really the Doctor and Romana, they actually don't have all that much that they can really do to be helping the situation. They can just really be trying their best. And it's something that Tom Baker and Mary Tam do a good job here. And it all builds up to the big cliffhanger where the Doctor gets whisked away in the big cliffhanger. Like a lot of the stuff that's missing is well, obviously Astra didn't die from radiation poisoning, because radiation doesn't just make you disappear. It would kill you, so there's no body. Now the Doctor gets whisked away, and that's our big exit. Now, there's a minor complaint with that, and mainly that as a cliffhanger, it feels like it's just repeating the same cliffhanger as part one. So the plot really hasn't necessarily... It makes the plot feel like it's moved less than it perhaps actually has. It's it's something that you kind of almost feel the need to have more of a cliffhanger. And just it doesn't work the way that it does. But other than that, this is also Armageddon Factor Part 2 is an excellent episode. It's just as good as Part 1. It continues the interesting thing. There's still that great atmosphere. You're getting us in one location like this is really, really solid. So overall, I'm going to give the Armageddon Factor Part 2 an 8 out of 10. It is the 8th of July, 2019, and I just finished watching Part 3 of the Armageddon Factor. Part 3 of the Armageddon Factor I find really interesting because this is the first episode that feels like we're actually having padding. Baker and Martin... Let's not say Baker and Martin don't use the time they have, to keep twists coming and, keep things interesting, like run it, keep going, give us something good and something, fun to watch, go for the whole let's go as over the top as we can. And there's some really good ideas here. There's still enough pace that you feel like things are moving. But the Shadow as a villain, the Shadow is not the Black Guardian. It's obvious that he's working for the Black Guardian, because he's looking for the 6th segment. He knows the Doctor has the other 5. He has the 6th. They make this twist that Princess Astra is the 6th segment, but it's just a weirdly defined twist. It's not like, oh, here is this twist for this story. How shocking. It's more of just sort of slipped into casual conversation in a way that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you're looking at the story. Like, okay, yes, we understand that this is the big twist, but it wasn't built up. It was just sort of, oh, it's the twist, here we go. Keep moving and keep the story going. When really, you could have spent more time on giving us a good explanation of, here is what the twist is. Here is where the Doctor and Princess Astra, here's who Princess Astra is. Because, and what's interesting is that we actually have a lot of sort of quote unquote, it's kind of hard. Genuinely, it's a little hard to describe, but it's quote unquote horror for the story. And sort of, it's actually genuinely distressing where Princess Astra gets, basically, gets, tortured because the Shadow seems to think, because basically the idea is that the 6th segment has been, was 6th segment was in the protection of her family and not herself. Like, that is the big twist. Mainly trying to search for Princess Astra in the middle of this episode before we actually get to Zeos' stuff, and oddly enough, is probably the weakest, is genuinely the weakest elements here. We have the introduction of Zeos as a planet. We find out that, it's, as a planet, it's not actually inhabited. It is, it is run by a supercomputer called Mentalis, which gives K9 something to do. This is like the first episode in a while to really play on the fact that K9 is a computer, and actually has him really, really given a, it's really given a good sort of like, yes, here we go, gives him something to do, which you kind of expect from Baker and Martin, as they are the creators of K9. They're the ones who, who obviously understand the character the most, and they do a really, really good job here. Like, the idea of Zeos being completely empty is great. Now, it's not entirely clear as to how when the Marshall of Atrios decides he's going to destroy, you know, he's gonna destroy the entire planet of Zeos. Because Zeos, again, uninhabited, is literally just a giant computer that's doing all of the things. Like, okay, so the Marshal is attacking Zeos, but Mentalis, the computer, is going to self-destruct both planets because it decides that that is the best, that is quote-unquote the best solution. This is the point of the story where you just kind of, it feels like you just kind of have to go with it, because the actual plot here, it doesn't quite make as much sense. When you think about it, it's like, okay, why would a computer be doing that as the best? Part of this could be easily down to the fact that you don't know if the computer is, if the computer is put there by the Black Guardian. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Though I will be honest, the cliffhanger is excellent. It's basically Zeos being bombed in what is gonna be, that is just a really solid, a really solid ending here. It really makes, it really, sort of makes the story work well, and it really gives it a good ending, like a good cliffhanger, and we're halfway through, and you really don't know where the story is moving. Like, this is, oddly enough, it's not using the 4 and 2 story style for a 6-parter. It's just sort of like letting the story go where it wants to go, and sort of having it move like that is something that it's really something that that Baker and Martin do well. They make it a really good ending for an episode. They make it they just make it really good. So overall, I am going to give the Armageddon Factor Part 3, because there are these problems a bit more than the first 2 episodes, a 7 out of 10. It is the 8th of July, 2019, and I just finished watching Part 4 of the Armageddon Factor. Part 4 of the Armageddon Factor is the first episode that feels like Bob Baker and Dave Martin have written themselves into a bit of a corner with what they're doing with the story. So much of the story takes time to try to right that perceived wrong. You have the end of the cliffhanger. Now, it is clever enough that the Doctor decides, let's try to build. Basically, let's build a time loop. A lot of this episode is building a temporary time loop using the 5 segments of the key to time and a sort of mock-up of the 6th, which is genuinely clever. And obviously that is something that it's something that it's with material that it will degrade. It starts to degrade quite a bit. It's it's one of those stories where you really have it's an episode where you have the big issue here is that building a time loop is that not a lot happens here. He puts basically everything on hold and tries to builds up almost a sense of this sort of false tension that yeah, we have an idea that the story is going somewhere, but really, what did we really do? No, we didn't do really that much in this episode. You have people trying. You have obviously you have Shap trying to get the Marshal to stop because he's on the Doctor's side now. It's you know and you have you have Merrick going with finding a projection of Princess Astra. You know that really that tries to stop him. It's as an episode it's a lot of moving. There's been talk of a third planet in between Atrios and Zeos since the third episode, and the big point is that the second that the that the story itself is basically trying to do a an interesting plot, but it's trying to get us there, and it's just trying to get us there. It feels like we're jumping through some hoops, because there's a point where the big cliffhanger is probably the weakest aspect. It's the Shadow basically declaring that he's won, really to nobody. You know, it's one of those stories that that we really don't get that solid of a conclusion. It's you have some good ideas here. The stuff with building the key to time together is actually really clever, and you really see the power of the key to time. With and the Doctor and Romana are great, and the Doctor and Romana actually, quote unquote, meeting Princess Astra here, and actually meaning her. They are before they're transported at the end of the episode. It's also great. There's some great stuff moving towards it, but the problem with this episode is that it meanders far too much from the first three. It's trying to get the story to basically it knows that it wants to get somewhere, and it's just sort of having trouble actually getting us there, kind of generally making it, it makes it kind of the weakest episode of the Armageddon factor so far. Because the Marshal's barely in it. We paused the conflict on Atrios and Zeos because we've essentially spent the time needed to unravel that. So that's been unraveled, and now they're just trying to basically get to some sort of a conclusion, even though in getting that conclusion we don't quite know. So overall, I'm going to give the Armageddon factor part 4 a 5 out of 10, because it's not bad. It's just very much a middle installment, and not in a very good way. It is the 9th of July 2019, and I just finished watching part 5 of the Armageddon factor. Now, part 5 of the Armageddon factor improves heavily on the faults of part 4. We're not back to the first 2 episodes, which were great, genuinely really good episode, with even if a bit flawed. But we have a lot of stuff, mainly because now we're at a point where Baker and Martin have obviously found the plot. They now have the idea of, okay, this is where we were working to. Here's where we are now. Now I know what I'm doing. Now we know more of what we're doing than we did before, which was a big issue in the first episode. In the fifth episode, in the previous fourth episode. I can count. I think part of that helps because while they weren't adhering, I mentioned they weren't adhering to a 4 and 2 structure. These last 2 episodes have created a paradigm shift into where we are. We are now actually facing the villain of the Shadow in this episode. There's a lot here where the Doctor faces him and Romana gets trapped, which is actually one of my complaints. I think in this episode in particular, Romana is just not present. There's very little of her, which kind of makes sense considering Mary Tam left the show because she didn't like the direction Romana was going in, and she only appears in season 16. The first Romana is played by Mary Tam. She obviously regenerates later, and it's, as an episode, it's one that it knows what it wants to be, which is very important. It knows that this is not that we are trying to build up the big cliffhanger, big cliffhanger moments, but we have to get, it has to actually, we have to start delivering on the Black Guardian, who hasn't appeared yet. That is very important to note, is that the Black Guardian as a character has not appeared yet. He has been sort of the boogeyman force driving the events of the season forward, without actually showing up. In the previous 5 stories, there has only really been some indication that Cesare of Diplos from the Stones of Blood was potentially working for the Black Guardian. And in this one, the Shadow is very obviously an underling of the Black Guardian as a character. He even says in this episode that this was all a plot. He knew Astra was the 6th segment. He had Mentalis built to start this war between Zeos and Atrios, so they would get the 6th segment and get a situation. Basically, is create a situation that the Doctor would basically fall into. It was basically not saying this was a trap, but essentially saying this was a trap. The Doctor fell right into the trap. And that is actually, I believe, really important, that springing the trap was done really well by Baker and Martin. It really makes you see, okay, yeah, that makes sense, which it almost justifies the Black Guardian's lack of presence, that no, he's simply biding his time because he knows the Doctor, why search for the 5 segments myself, while I can have the Doctor do it. And I already have the 6th one. There goes my plan. There's even I believe a fan theory that the White Guardian in the Ribos operation wasn't the actual White Guardian. That's never been confirmed. It's just a theory. But with that evidence, it kind of makes sense. And this is only on the 5th episode. And remember, the Black Guardian hasn't appeared yet. There's even this point where you really see how the Black Guardian uses people. He trapped this character Drax, who is a Time Lord, about the same age as the Doctor, and is a character who is basically a con man. Like he talks with an act like he's from Brixton in London, because he was trapped there. He's used mostly for comic relief, but he's actually quite fun. He's a fun character, and there's a reason why he's remembered. And as a character, what works about Drax is that he was willing. He's not evil per se, but he doesn't have that rigid morals. He's almost a bit more human. He's more self-opportunistic. Like, he wants to get off this planet. It's all you have to do is, when someone comes here with the segments, trap him, and he's like, oh, yeah, but I wasn't expecting it to be the Doctor, someone who I quite like as a person. It's sort of the, yeah, I can kill a random. It's sort of drawing on that Charlie problem of, yeah, I could kill a random person, but I wouldn't want to kill my friend. It's an interesting look at with the character's morality, all done in a comedic style. Though sadly there are still some elements here that just they don't quite work. Mainly K9 and Romana. Again, Romana's basically off screen for most of the episode. Outside of like a really clever illusion, there isn't much with her. And the same with K9. Like he goes evil, but under the control of the Shadow with their stuff, and that not only happens, but then just sort of is like, oh, and then it gets fixed, without any real consequence. It's minor, but it's a lot of these minor things that they add up. And again, you're also just suffering from just a general loss of momentum of the previous episodes. Yet oddly enough, it's still a good episode. It's still solid and was definitely enjoyable. So overall, I'm going to give the Armageddon Factor Part 5 a 7 out of 10. It is the 10th of July 2019, and I just finished watching Part 6 of the Armageddon Factor, the concluding episode, and perhaps the best episode of the entire story. And I say that without trepidation because as an episode, it is one that, well, it's just plain excellent. This is a story where you actually have, we've had a lot of time built around the Doctor and Romana, and having their basically having their story go around. You build up from the cliffhanger where Drax shrunk the Doctor, and then himself, it's the Doctor and Drax work together. Basically they then use K9 to sneak right in to the TARDIS, and in sneaking into the TARDIS, that's how they basically get out of the Shadow. They have Astra converted into the 6th segment, which fulfills her destiny, and they basically find a rather clever way. They use Drax to basically sort out the time loop. They mainly the time loop is quote unquote sorted out because, well, the Doctor and they have Drax's you have Drax's expertise when it comes to basically knowing what wire to press when it comes to dealing with a bomb. He knows that, all right, you press this wire, you cut this wire. Of course, done at the last second because this is a Doctor Who story, and things done at the last second basically mean you get to have tension up until the final moments. Like it is a really solid, a really solid episode that you get the characters built up like this, in a story that you really had a good sense of what was going on. But really where this episode shines is in its climax. The big climax is basically with the key to time being assembled. You have the Doctor almost immediately, genuinely scanning the audience to think, wow, is he going to use the key to time to, kill somebody? To basically take over the universe? Something that, he very easily could do, because he is, he's a character who really knows, he knows what he has basically been doing. Then there's this basically up until this point where the character, where the Doctor, where Romana calls him on this, and it's like, yeah, no, I would never, of course I wouldn't do that. That'd be crazy. And that's when the Black Guardian shows up in the guise of the White Guardian, which the Doctor and Romana immediately see through, and they defeat him. Well, here's the thing: they don't defeat him by trying to give a big action-packed conclusion. No, they just the Doctor and Romana, they just turn on the TARDIS's defenses, and quickly make sure and basically rescatter the pieces. Again, because it's sort of that, it's an anticlimax, but as a climax it works. And then the Doctor famously puts in a randomizer, which will basically keep the TARDIS from where the TARDIS goes as random. So the Doctor and Romana are now off for more adventures, but this time no one knows where they're going, which is genuinely, it's a good bit of, it's good to shake up the, it's a good idea to shake up this, the format of the show, and it leaves the season on, like, here, that we're actually moving into something, like, this arc has affected the status quo, something that is genuinely necessary. Overall, it's a good episode, and it's a good, satisfying conclusion, something that, oddly enough, makes me feel like the Armageddon Factor as a whole has just been overlooked. So overall, I'm going to give the Armageddon Factor Part 6 a 9 out of 10. And we averaged the 6th episode to give the Armageddon Factor a final score of 7.33 out of 10. Thank you, everybody, for watching this installment of the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. As always, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I enjoy hearing from you, and I love to engage in my comment section. And join me next time when we start taking a look at the second series of Big Finish's 4th Doctor Adventures, and the only audio series to feature the late Mary Tam as Romana 1 with the Antimatter.